A huge barrier was created by the Germans when they developed the Enigma code. The machines that created the coded messages could be changed at a whim, and the variables that determined how the code is created were seemingly infinite. The Enigma needed to be decoded in order to break the blockade of Britain, a deadly German trap that was holding back the Allied forces. Breaking the code was a massive achievement that influenced the outcome of World War II. This is the story of the Enigma code and the man who broke it. Code-breaking and cryptanalysis before World War II was clunky and difficult, leading to slow response times and often faulty information. Alan Turing worked hard through the 30s and 40s to improve the code-breaking technology that was used against the Germans during the Second World War. These changes proved vital in helping the Allied forces emerge victorious in 1945. The development of basic Enigma machines, or rotor-based cipher machines, began in 1915. The Dutch Navy had the first functioning rotor machine. Rotor refers to the style of code-breaking device, but the Dutch did not utilize it much. In 1917, there were 4 main variations from different countries: the US, Sweden, the Netherlands, and most importantly, Germany. The German scientist Arthur Scherbius created the first German Enigma machine in 1918, but the machine wasn't made public until 1923. Scherbius innovated on previous designs from Sweden and the Netherlands and created a much cheaper, more efficient machine to manufacture and use. In 1926, the German military commissioned a few Class D machines, which was a 3-wheeled cipher machine. In 1935, a man named Alan Turing was elected a Fellow of King's College for his dissertation on computable numbers. He continued his work to try and solve David Hilbert's decision problem, or Entscheidungsproblem. This is a challenge proposed by David Hilbert and another mathematician, Wilhelm Ackermann. It poses that mathematicians should be able to come up with an algorithm that can determine if any equation has an absolute answer, eliminating redundancies in the mathematical process. Turing presented his thesis in late 1936, and the concept of a machine that could determine the results of any set of information was born. This became known as a Turing machine, and was a definitive step forward in Turing's credibility as a mathematical savant and an out-of-the-box thinker. Turing's thesis propelled him into the world of elite mathematicians. Starting in September of 1938, Turing worked with the Government Code and Cipher School. This school was one of the major skill pools that staffed Bletchley Park, an SIS-funded code-breaking facility. Hans Thilo Schmidt was an employee at the German cipher office who committed treason when he sold the Enigma machine operating procedures to the French Secret Service in 1933. The French in turn gave the procedures to the Polish. The Poles then took this information and began working. The Poles had been collecting information regarding the German Enigma machines and had been able to crack the codes coming from Grundstellung machines, Enigma machines that use the basic settings. From these codes, they were able to learn that Germany was preparing for war. On the 15th of September, 1938, the Germans stopped using Grundstellung machines and added 2 extra components to their devices, more wheel combinations. These added on to the previous 3 code wheels, making the decryption of Enigma messages much more difficult. The Polish began looking for ways to get this information to other Allied countries before Germany began their invasion. On July 25, 1939, the Polish Cipher Bureau met with the French and the British to share their work. The British and French were also gifted with a replica Enigma machine. The Polish Cipher Bureau destroyed all of their equipment and documents immediately after the meeting, and the Bureau is shut down 5 weeks before Germany declared war on Poland. The rest of the world began preparing for war, including Britain. Bletchley Park had been funded specifically in the case of a war, so they got working. Bletchley was staffed by the cream of the mathematical crop, and soon they were able to break Enigma codes by hand on paper. As tensions increased in Europe, so did the flow of encrypted messages, and soon Bletchley Park was understaffed and overworked. Alan Turing decides to look into ways of automating code breaking, and presents his first contribution shortly before the war began. His invention, titled the bombe, improved on the Polish Bomba, a code-breaking device rendered obsolete when the Germans improved their Enigma machine design. This sped up the decryption of codes from the German Air Force and Army, but one more roadblock stood in the way of Britain controlling the airwaves. The German Navy used entirely unique methods of encryption, and added 2 extra code combinations on top of the already challenging 5 used on the common Enigma machines. It was now less of a roadblock and more of a concrete barrier. On May 9, 1941, the British Royal Navy captured the German U-boat U-110. On the submarine were several German code books. Turing worked day and night to discover the wiring of the new code wheels, and is soon able to decode a small part of the German naval messages. But then, on February 2, 1942, the German Navy added yet another code combination to their Enigma machines, meaning Turing was back to square one. This means that during the Battle of the Atlantic, the British could not decode German naval messages, resulting in huge losses of men and supplies. Turing worked for 9 months to work out the wiring of the new Enigma M4 machines, until October 30th, 1942, when the British Royal Navy yet again captured more codebooks from a U-boat. Turing modified a bombe to fit the new specifications, and soon Bletchley Park was able to decode messages from the new German machines. Bletchley Park decided to pass on what they learned to the US due to a shortage of supplies to build and fund the British code-breaking machines, and by 1943, the United States was handling most of the German encryptions. A few new issues arose that needed to be addressed by the specialists at Bletchley, though. A certain German naval officer, Admiral Karl Donitz, questioned the security of the Enigma machines to the point where he commissioned an extra code wheel to be placed on the already complex M4 machines. Another addition he required was the creation of a specialized plug board or set of circuits that was changed every 10 days. This was streamlined with the introduction of a wired knob called the Enigma Uhr, which meant that the circuits could be changed after every message, making it incredibly difficult to decode. This would have stumped the codebreakers at Bletchley if not for German user error. The new codes were broken within weeks. Breaking the barrier of the Enigma code had an enormous impact on the war. Without the help of Alan Turing and the codebreakers at Bletchley Park, the Allied forces may not have come out victorious. The work at Bletchley and the captured Enigma machines were kept secret for a long time after the war. The employees at Bletchley went back to their normal lives, and Turing went back to researching machine thinking inspired by his time at Bletchley Park. He went on to publish his 1950 paper, Computing Machinery and Intelligence, in which he introduced something called the imitation game, which we now know as the Turing test. The test is used to determine whether or not a machine can think for itself. Turing was arrested in January of 1952 for gross indecency due to his homosexuality, which was illegal in Britain at the time. Because of his arrest, he was not allowed to continue his work at the GCCS. Turing was given a choice between imprisonment and probation with hormonal treatment. He chose the latter and was confined to petty experiments in his home. He died of apparent suicide due to cyanide poisoning on June 7, 1954, a forgotten icon of history. He was not to remain forgotten, though. His work on computing machines did not go unnoticed during the war. A man named J.R. Womersley read Turing's college thesis in 1936 and began working on a design for a machine calculator. In 1945, Womersley met Max Newman, a British professor who knew Turing. Newman introduced Womersley and Turing, and Womersley convinced Turing to join his ACE project. ACE stood for Automatic Computing Engine, but it was a relatively basic machine at first. Turing had the idea of creating an adaptive machine. Previously constructed computers, like the British Colossus, needed their circuits to be changed for every new objective that needed to run, a time-consuming process. Turing wanted to create a machine with memory, meaning that you could insert a set of instructions, generally a series of punch cards, and the machine would interpret them and change to carry out the program. This innovation created the basis for modern computing and programs. Though he had an enormous impact on history, Turing remained nearly completely forgotten for almost 50 years. This is the end of the story of Alan Turing, but his legacy will live on through the machines that surround us.